Hi, and welcome to the Future of Dermatology podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Farah Kamangar, board certified dermatologist. We are here to talk about anything and everything dermatology related. You'll hear from me and my guests who are dermatologists, physicians, experts, scientists, residents, and medical students in the field of dermatology. We publish weekly, so if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button and show us some love, and thank you for joining us. Hi, I'm so excited for today's episode. We are joined by the one and only Dr. Jennifer Soung, as she is a dermatologist extraordinaire, but does so many things outside of it. I even had trouble kind of pinning down what to focus on because she's done everything from academics, private practice, clinical research. I just saw her in a commercial with Ted Danson, and it was just like she does everything. And one of the best things in the last couple of years was attending her LEADderm conference, which was so incredible. I had heard, kind of the thought behind it was to do a very different kind of dermatology conference. And when I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is a very different, amazing derm conference. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I am equally matched by someone who is wonderful, and your energy is so amazing, Farah. So thank you so much for having me on your podcast, and excited to be here today to share my story.
Yeah, no, we'd love to hear it. And we always like to hear the backstory, as little or as much as you want to share. How did you get to the point of doing all these amazing things?
Well, you know me, I like to be an open book because I think that it is so important, especially as women, that we share our stories, because it is the very other stories that many women in my life have shared with me that have inspired me to do many great things. I would have never imagined 15 years into my career that I would be starting a meeting. So when you talk about making the impossible possible, I think we all just need that kind of inspiration boost. And that's exactly why I started LEADderm. But to kind of rewind a little bit, when I finished dermatology, I went straight into academics. I was always very much involved in clinical research. I love clinical research. For me, I think going to a doctor, a dermatologist with a chronic skin condition, and there aren't always good treatments, what you want is hope. And I think that's what research does, is gives patients hope when you haven't found the right treatment. So that was something I was always involved in throughout my training, and it actually started in college. And so I started off as director of clinical research at UC Irvine and head of psoriasis and phototherapy. And just to give you a little glimpse, is even at that point when they told me, like, you get this position, I thought, how can I do this straight out of residency? I need more training. And we've been in school for 10 years. Like, what was I thinking, right? And I think that a lot of us have that inner dialogue of, I'm not sure if I can do it, especially as women. And because that's kind of how the culture and how we grew up. And so thankfully, I had some great mentors in my life that said, you have to do this, and you actually have the perfect training to do it. And so from there, I was there for 5 years. It was an amazing jumpstart to my career. After that, I decided to open up my own research center next door in Santa Ana, an underserved area of Orange County. And now I've been here for 10 years. So I can't believe I'm kind of like celebrating 15 years in dermatology, and with a big passion, continuing to do clinical research in medical derm and serving underserved communities. So I love my patient population. It's super diverse in racial ethnic backgrounds, so skin tones, as well as socioeconomic, and just seeing lots of serious skin conditions here. So I have the joy of working also with my internal medicine colleague, Dr. Wayne Ho. We started working together 7 years ago, and what has been an amazing intersection is now he is working on many of those diabetes, weight loss medications, these new GLP agonists, and we're seeing the intersection of how taking care of patients as a whole, especially our psoriasis patients, and helping them lose weight improves all of their comorbidities as well as their psoriasis. So this is a really neat new adventure that the two of us are delivering care to our psoriasis patients in a really unique way. And so then my latest adventure is starting LEADderm last year. So we had our first meeting in Newport Beach on June 1st. And it was really an inspiration because after being a dermatologist and leader in kind of my specialty niche, I realized there were still not enough women and women of diverse backgrounds at the leadership positions. And that kind of surprised me. I thought that we would move the needle after so many years, and wanting to see leadership to be more impactful, inclusive, and diverse. And that's really what prompted me to start a new and different kind of meeting that allows a space for that conversation to create a community where we can support each other, really professionally and personal development.
My gosh, I love it. Like, I'm having so many thoughts of all the questions that I want to ask you. And I think it all probably actually goes back to all the things you did at LEADderm. So maybe we'll start backwards and go back. So one of the things I was thinking about is you went to the academics, you rocked it, even when thinking, do I have this? Do I have the right training? Which, like you said, of course you do after years of medical school, residency. And the amazing thing is sometimes outside people seeing it in us before we see it ourselves, which was fantastic. And then changing from academics to private practice, I imagine that was not an easy decision. So I feel like there's so much, like we could do a whole episode about that, but would love to understand kind of your thought process and just taking that leap. And then past that, like I want to talk about GLP-1s, for an entire 30 minutes too, and kind of get your experience of because there's this kind of paradigm shift of, do we maybe start those earlier on before some biologics? There's so much there. But let's start with LEADderm because it was so amazing. Like, what an amazing conference. And I mean, tell us more about it. But of course, we go to a lot of different dermatology conferences and we see kind of the same setup, same talks, and, very, very kind of disease state focus, which are great too. And that's definitely what thing that we love to go to. But this, I felt like you really just sat there and thought about it, how the talks would go together. And you really just, it weaved together to tell a story. And it was so impactful how that happened. So I would just love to hear about, like, how did you choose what topics, which speakers? Because it's true, like, kind of doing something for the first time. You might have an idea, but to actually just execute it, it was so great to see. So I'd love to kind of hear your thought about bringing it to life.
So you are absolutely right. This meeting is so different. So kind of to set the record straight, it has nothing to do with the science and treatment of skin. And people are surprised when they first hear that. And so part of it is the biggest theme is about personal and professional development. And when I think about kind of what makes us happy and great doctors is starting from the inside. And so all of the talks were about leadership skills or building communities and finding purpose in what we do. And so to give you a couple examples, some things and conversations that I felt like were at the top of dermatology were, for example, looking at more women in the C-suite. So Amy Gordonier from SkinFix gave an amazing talk on why we need more women. And LEADderm is not just about gender inequities. And in fact, we had 70% women and about 30% of our male colleagues. And I really see them as allies going forward. So this isn't a meeting about just women empowerment. Other topics we touched upon, Dr. Sean Allen, he talked about finding purpose in our practice. We have an opportunity in dermatology, not only as leaders, what we do as physicians, but leaders of our practice to create a community or a family where people come to work and they find meaningful work and a group of people where they enjoy working with and give back, I think, in some ways to the community. Other topics we talked about, Farah, you had an amazing talk where we explored artificial intelligence so that we're not afraid of AI and we can adopt AI. And I love the themes you talked about, even when we think about what information we put into AI to have an opportunity to actually eliminate biases that we may have grown up with or our culture has given us, and to create a new language. So, I think LEADderm gives us an opportunity to talk about so many important issues in dermatology where we don't have another forum to talk about. For example, I had some of my great social media influencer colleagues who came in and we had a panel and talked about professionalism and etiquette with regards to social media. So they talked about their stories about why and what their purpose of starting social media, and not just to be an influencer. It really starts with a genuine purpose. And another one of my favorite topics last year was also diversity, equity, inclusion, and what that means in medicine. It can be sometimes a really touchy subject for everyone, but when we really talk about how do we be inclusive in taking care of our patients and in our communities specific to medicine, all of this makes very much sense, as we do need more photos for patients of different colors, and psoriasis does look different. There are different issues that we pay attention to in different skin tones, and many different rashes can be more relevant to certain populations. And sometimes the diagnosis can be really tricky. Certainly, even in my own practice, I have patients coming with different skin tones, and eczema can look very different compared to white skin. And so I love the idea of LEADderm giving an opportunity to talk about so many issues that we may not touch upon. And then on top of that, leadership. So our keynote speaker last year was Laura Bakey, who is a prominent woman in healthcare leadership, who talked about emotional intelligence and other topics like collaborative negotiations, which are so important to what we do on a daily basis, not only with how we communicate with our staff, but our patients as well.
I loved it. Yeah, those conversations were amazing. I learned so much from that collaborative negotiation talk because life is all about negotiations, and that's not something that we kind of talk about much. And it's really, like you mentioned, of course, in clinic, there are all these forces happening. There's all these different things happening, but we don't necessarily talk about them or basically like digest them down to be able to understand them. We do that with the medical part of what we're doing. We digest it down to like the molecular level. We sit around, we have conversations and debates about treatment, pathophysiology, but on a given basis and in a daily basis in your practice, there's all these other aspects that we just kind of fail to talk about. And the people kind of put things in general buckets like burnout, or people like to be in this type of practice setting with that type of practice setting. And then I was just at the AED at one of the talks where there were different academic, private, and kind of different settings discussed. And you realize it's all the same stuff, whatever setting you're in. So if you haven't mastered the negotiations, you haven't mastered leadership, taking care of your staff, taking care of your patients, you're going to basically suffer in whatever setting you go to, which was sort of like the shared topics. And it's amazing that we don't spend as much time on it because healthcare is getting way more complex. I mean, it's probably always been complex to some level, but it's no longer, you get out of residency, open up shop, and, just have your basic thing. It's so much more complicated than that. So it's like you don't really have the option to not exercise these muscles of, learning these other extra traits. I love that you've actually just been so thoughtful about it. I imagine this is something that's probably been years of you thinking as you've gone through your journey of like, this would be an interesting topic. And I love to kind of hear about that. Like how, maybe we can go back to your decision to go from academics to practice. I mean, that's a huge jump, I imagine, to have to just make sure you have all these skill sets right away when you're switching from like one model to the next. So we just have to kind of hear your personal journey of realizing, man, we need more about these topics.
Yeah, I love that question. And, when I was saying earlier, you were alluding to, I was probably thinking about it for years. Certainly the topic of just wanting to see more women and women of diverse backgrounds, leadership has always been the top of my mind. And it was kind of, I have to be honest, like a shock when I first started as director of clinical research. People were like, did she even graduate high school? That was the first thought. And when I would go to meetings at the university level for research, it was, oh, hey, you must be Dr. Jenny. And I said, oh, who gave you permission to shorten my name? It's really Jennifer Soung for you. And then number two, why am I the only one being dressed by my first name instead of doctor, like everyone else in this room? So I it just started from the beginning. And then just these little, I don't know, we call them micro insults or microaggressions. Over time, I thought, wow, we really need to change the culture. And the way to change the culture is for women, one, to have great women model it and support each other. So a big theme this year for LEADderm is called sponsorship. So we all know the concept of mentorship, right? You can get advice from people, but for women and kind of underrepresented people to kind of make it to that, you have to have those opportunities. So other people have to give you those opportunities. And that's why sponsorship, meaning I'm going to choose you to be a speaker at that next conference and not the same person that we see every year. Or I'm going to give you this new opportunity. And when I talk about diversity at conferences, it's really diversity not only in gender and racial ethnic background, but age and experience. Sometimes we just see like the more senior dermatologists, certainly they have experience, but everyone of different ages also have different relevant experiences to share. And so every year my goal is, while I love the faculty I had last year, is really to have different faculty every year. And I truly felt like the faculty made my conference. And I spent a lot of time talking one-on-one with each faculty that we aligned on our vision for the meeting. And that's what really made it magical. And so when you ask me, like, was I planning this for a long time? The topic itself and my passion for just wanting to support others in our dermatology community has been like career long. So always. And wanting, I'm sometimes like a way open book now. Like I will share everything from my journey in academics to private practice to private equity. As a mom, a working mom of 3 children, my kids are teens now. And Farah, oh my God, my oldest son just turned 18 today.
Today. Well, happy birthday. That's a huge accomplishment. It's, yes. Oh my goodness. That's a big step.
Yeah. And then being like just an amazing researcher in my field. I love what I get to do in medical dermatology. I think it's such an unmet need. And then finally starting a meeting. And when I thought about the meeting and started talking about, it was actually only a year and a half ago when I started talking about the meeting, and many colleagues and friends who said, this has been a life, like a career long passion for you. You should start it. And so they were really part of having a great group of people in your life who support you, gave me that inspiration boost. You know what? I should just do it. I have nothing to lose. And these days when I look at it, it's like, if I don't try, I would probably be really mad at myself if I didn't. And I will learn a lot from just trying.
Oh, it was amazing. And you executed so perfectly. I mean, because we throw a lot of meetings with SF Derm as well. And I was learning so much from your meeting. I'm like, man, we should do a registration this way. And we should have, like, you had all the right tools and tech. And I love what you said about, starting academics and navigating that world. I've kind of felt that as well. I went to kind of a larger multi-specialty clinic. I've served as chair in our department, and you go to these meetings and, you're not necessarily that young anymore either, right? Because we've been through residency and all that. You're not 21, but still, or maybe we just look really good because we're dermatologists. So we'll take it.
Right.
But you do get that feedback often. It's not far and few in between. It's like repeatedly. And I suspect we, both men and women, go into these big roles probably with the same doubts. I know like Dr. John Koo is kind of said a very similar story to you, where he's like, I graduated UCSF and they gave me this UCSF Psoriasis Center. And day one, he always says this, he's like, I looked over into our head nurse and was like, wait, what do I do here? It's because I was an experienced nurse. So I think out of residency, we probably, all go into it with that sort of like, man, can I take this big job? Even though, although we are all very trained to do it. But I wonder on some aspect is, do the women leaders keep getting this kind of feedback? And maybe on some aspect, the male leaders keep getting a different kind of feedback. And that would change your trajectory, right? Like if you're kind of constantly getting this, yeah, you nailed it, keep going, kind of vibe, and you keep going up and up these ladders, because you do see that women do engage. And And I think that was one of the talks too. I forget which speaker gave it, that we do engage with manager level, chair, department chair, but there's some point, the ceiling where the women drop off, right? So it's like the trajectory changes. So we do go up, and it's not that we have children. It's not that this or that, we have the time, we have the energy, we have the motivation. We certainly have the capability, because then you have amazing women going out and starting private practices, clinical research units, maybe even consider like a whole business where another larger business who is really apt at running a business comes and evaluates it and actually wants to purchase it. I mean, that's like the ultimate validation that this is a well-run business. And so for individuals who can do that, but in a very structured setting, they're getting like this kind of other type of feedback. It's kind of an insane thing, but it happens every day. It's happened to me. Sounds like it's happened to you. It's happened to my many other colleagues. Some women have kind of left academics and kind of larger settings, because I guess we're lucky, and as physicians, we can play around with different models. Let's say you're in technology, you kind of have to stay at the big tech company and do what you can to kind of break through the glass ceiling. Whereas for us, if we find we've maxed out at a certain setting, we can go and open up shops elsewhere and rock it in other worlds. So I love what you said about that. It's just so true. And it just explains where some parts of where that falls apart for women in leadership.
Right. And that's why I think women need a little more support. Not that men don't. And this is really about allyship, is having those open conversations, because we all have this inner dialogue is, can I do it? I'm not sure. And when you have a community where you can share these stories and you see other women doing it, you're like, hey, I can do it. I am not that crazy. Or you actually see that you need something concrete to see. Like that's actually doable. I've seen someone do it and they survived. And so that was really important to me early on in my career. I finished residency and I was already pregnant with my second, knew I was going to have more kids. And I thought, how am I going to juggle this? Like, what does that look like? And so one of my closest dear friends and colleague, Jenny Marassi, I called her up and I was like, I need to know your schedule, exactly how you break it down. And she literally told me, like, this is what time I wake up, and I'll do morning yoga. And then I have time to have breakfast with my kids, and I drop them off, and then my day goes until this time for kids, and this is what I carve out for research. And I thought, okay, now that seems like a concrete schedule that I can think about how to create my own schedule and create that work-life blend for myself. And I think for many years, I kept thinking that there was a perfect balance. And don't get me wrong, there are many days where I feel like, oh my goodness, I'm working way too much and I miss my kids. And I readjust. And that's why my favorite word right now is really blend, because you're going to find you have more, there may be times where you're dedicating a lot more time and energy to your work because there's an important deadline. And so you're going to have to put aside your family for a little bit. And then there are other times where you feel like, you know what? My family needs me more now, or there's something special going on, and you're going to dedicate a little more attention. And only you define that for yourself. And I always tell them, no one wants to feel guilty all the time, right? Is not feeling good at work and not feeling good at home. And so being kind of intentional about where you spend your time, carve it out for yourself. So you're happy. You feel good about being in both places.
Yeah, no, that's great advice too, because sometimes you think if I take this time off, or if I do this thing, like it's going to be the end of the world, and these projects I'm working on are going to like disappear into thin air or something. But that doesn't happen, right? You have these ebbs and flows, and there's a few years sometimes, especially when the kids are younger, where you might disappear from life a bit, and then there's times where you're going to every conference and it's okay to have those moments where you don't have to be kind of like consistently the same person all the time doing the same exact thing. And the other piece of it is you don't have to be defined by one thing. I find that happens sometimes too. Like this colleague is, let's say, maybe disease specific. This is the psoriasis person. This is this person. But you can do all of it. Like you mentioned, you're doing everything, like all different forms of practicing medicine, clinical trials, inflammatory skin disease, conferences. So it's amazing to kind of just be able to be fluid and do everything.
Yeah, I think you should really follow your passions. That's what's so amazing about dermatology. Obviously, I'm biased. I think we are the smartest and we have the best job as physicians. We do. And so I want to see us thrive as a community. So kind of circling back to your original question about my journey in academics, I think at the time, looking back, I would have totally done academics or continued academics. And I love sharing my experience. It's not about a cautionary tale, like academics is not bad. But at the time, I really struggled with a lot of just, it wasn't the right environment for me to thrive. And I didn't feel like I really had the support as a young female assistant professor who was just, my research was growing really quickly and didn't have the right support at the time at the university. I still keep in touch with many of my colleagues at UC Irvine, and it has certainly grown. They have changed in many ways and provided a lot more support for especially the assistant professors now. And so what was kind of neat, you asked about my decision going from academics into private practice. Definitely not easy. What is so amazing about dermatology is that we can still be very academic as much as we want in private practice. And so I've really created kind of my own work schedule where I get to split my time. I see routine dermatology patients 2 days a week. The other 2 days I carve out and dedicate for clinical research. And now, and for the last 7 years, I've been on clinical faculty at Harbor UCLA. So I go to the county hospital and I love teaching. And so that was one of the things I missed the most about academics was the teaching component. And now I joke around with my colleagues. I'm like that grandma, when you come in to the residents, I get to like spoil them, have fun with them. And then once I'm done with clinic, I'm like, bye guys. Then I get to see you next month. So I get to do all the fun.
Yeah, that is the perfect way to describe like an adjunct professor type of role. You're right. You don't have the nitty gritty. You're having to go through the details. We could just go have fun. I remember even back in residency, the residents always love those docs too, because they really are there for just like, they are the grandma. You come in, you spoil, you can have all the candy you want, and then you leave. That's amazing. And so I'd love to hear about this upcoming LEADderm. Anything different? Anything exciting? What should we know? Like the dates and location?
Yeah, this will be our second meeting, so it's coming up the week after Labor Day. So we switched it to the fall and hoping to optimize on that good weather. So it's September 6th through 7th. It's all day Saturday, half day Sunday, and I have about half of our faculty. So check it out on leadderm.org. And looking forward to seeing you there. Every year I'm going to have a theme. This year, our theme is sponsorship and mentorship. So every speaker will touch upon the kind of key individuals in their life that really that helped them early on or throughout their career and was key in kind of inspiring them or gave them an opportunity to kind of be where they are today. This year, Dr. Sean Allen is my key faculty advisor. Last year it was Peter Leo, and this year is Sean Allen. So I'm excited. We continue to working on kind of routing our speaker agenda. And it's always something that I put a lot of thought into. And to be honest, maybe I just like live and breathe it all day long. I think about it. It's my passion project.
Oh, amazing. I'm so excited. I'm going to be there. So everybody check it out. It's going to be a really, really great meeting. And we always end the podcast with asking about what you're excited about the future of dermatology. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be like the things we talked about. Anything major that you're very excited about.
Oh my gosh, Farah, there's so much. Like I wake up every day.
That's a hard question. That's a really tough question.
Because I love what we get to do. A project that I'm really excited about that I touched upon is really looking at, I mentioned earlier, the intersection between patients living with obesity and chronic autoimmune skin diseases. And I've always imagined delivering care to my patients, especially with psoriasis, is treating them as a whole. And I'm not sure what the best word or what to kind of, I'm still brainstorming this, because when I use the word holistic, it sounds like I'm going to give a patient herbal medications or tell them to go.
That's right.
Practice yoga. But really for me, it's about, it's really about taking care of their health as a whole. we have great medications to treat their skin. And we know that sometimes when we're not helping them, or we don't have a team of doctors to work together in a collaborative care kind of situation, that they're still going to have fluctuations in their skin disease activity. So you can't ignore all of their other comorbidities. So I'm envisioning a future where we deliver care in a collaborative way. And remember, I went into dermatology because I really think of the skin as a window to our systemic health. And so really looking at patients as a whole. So help me think of that new word.
I know. I've actually thought about this too. There was someone at the AED that said we're like the primary care doctors of the skin. That kind of is like, doesn't even fully explain it, but it's getting towards, we got to come up with this term because it's not holistic. You're right. Holistic has been like, even though it actually kind of defines it, but it's been branded differently. So when you say it, you just think of like a different kind of market. We do have, this needs to be one of the discussion topics at LEADderm. We need to define this because we really are like, we've had other talks on the podcast where we talk about the skin being almost like the check engine light. Like if there's an itch, is that signaling something is going on deep down?
Absolutely.
If you're aging and we're doing all these anti-aging treatments, but like your sugars are crazy high, like we need to fix that before we do any other procedures.
In the aesthetic industry is that we're now looking at treating from the inside out, right? So not just from fillers, Botox, and laser procedures, but really talking about skin health from the inside. So I think this is a unique opportunity to define with a new word or a way of thinking about that.
We really do. And we need to brand it uniquely dermatology because like wellness, longevity, these words don't quite explain what we're thinking about. Like I think we kind of fully understand what we're trying to do here, but they don't quite grasp it, or they've just been branded by different fields. So they kind of have their own things to it. We should totally do this. We should have do a 3-hour brainstorming session. And I know you can think of...
Ask your next speaker that question too.
It's true. Let's just ask you, because I was thinking of like, if we did a 3-hour session on this, because it would need some thought, you can probably think of the best 3 to 4 people to bring in and who could help us like think through this. I think that's one of the wonderful things about LEADderm too. You get a glimpse of how your brain works when you're trying to kind of put together really smart people to tackle a problem, which is what I think that the vibe of the conference is so much collaboration and have, kind of thinking through these things. But let's do an episode just on that. I'll give it some more thought
Thank you so much, Farah, for having me today.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited for LEADderm. We'll share more about it after the event. And thank you for everything you're doing for the field. It's just amazing to have leaders like you that are really spearheading all of these movements. Thank you for listening to the Future of Dermatology podcast. Remember to hit that subscribe button and share the podcast with your friends. The more you share and subscribe, the more we'll be able to grow and share our dermatology knowledge. If you have burning dermatology questions, feel free to leave them in the comment below, and we would love to address them in a future episode. And please note that this podcast is not intended to substitute for medical advice from your doctor.